Right, good morning, everybody. I'd like to introduce you to the second of our four-part series, looking at 2020 vision of the future. Last week, we looked at education. This week, we're going to be looking at things from a historical perspective. Next week, we're going to be looking at things from a sociological perspective concerning Black and African history or experience. And in the final week, we'll be looking at the psychological significance to the Black experience. And that's going to be quite a sensitive topic because I'm going to be showing some lynching images, and I wouldn't advise any child who's around you, etc., to be present during that particular presentation. So just bear that in mind. I'll remind people next week and also the week after. Right, so here we are. So here's are the two posters. If you were here with the first week, you'd have these two posters already. So each week I'll be throwing a flyer up in the social media. So what will happen under those circumstances is that you will have some sort of reminder or information, but I got all your emails, etc. So that's something which I can send out. You know, I don't mind you emailing me. You can remind me on certain things. I know some of you gave me personal calls, etc., which is wonderful. So that's another thing which I don't mind. So thank you very much. So let's have a look at what's happened here. All right. Okay, let me just go back. For some reason, no pictures came there. Okay, so here it's supposed to be an image with Orlando Patterson. And one of the things he says that when Black history is being taught within the Western world, there are three perspectives in which people like to take, especially Eurocentrics. So you've got the catastrophic, contributionism, and the survivalist. Sorry for the typo in catastrophic. So what he's basically saying that two emphasis are based upon conflict theory. So when Black history is taught within the Western context or within Western academies, they usually look at the catastrophic. This is where Africa was falling and where Black people themselves were losing ground from a historical perspective. And obviously you got the survivalist, which actually looks at the period of colonization and slavery. And from those two perspectives, we then begin to understand that they look at resistant movements, especially those of us who are from African Caribbean backgrounds, you know, especially living in the West, in America, the Caribbean islands, Canada, Central America, etc., to overthrow such a barbaric system. Now, what you'll find where contributionism is concerned, the people who really like to focus on that are the Afrocentrics or Black people, because unfortunately, Europeans or Eurocentrism has left us in this 500-year rule. So if you ask most people who are from the dominant culture, where does our history start? They will start in slavery. However, archaeological digs and excavations and DNA analysis have proved otherwise, that Black people and people from Africa are the oldest people on the planet, okay, in the world. They went and populated the whole world. And up until approximately 20,000 years ago, that's when skin color started to mutate. So Europeans as a cluster group, Semitics who were light skinned as a cluster group, and mutations, okay? This is what they call genetic recessive, okay? Then a mutation. When we're in those cold weathers up in the northern caps, what happened? We had to lose our melanin to cope with that weather, what they refer to as climatic change. It was called the Winterstadial, and the glaciational period lasted for approximately between 15 to 20,000 years. And during that period, darker skinned people became light. So what I'm trying to emphasize here, where contributionism is concerned, is that most Afrocentrics, most Black people who come from the Western perspective, African Americans, African Caribbeans, Afro Latinos, Afro Hispanics, etc., we always like to look at the contributionism because we know our history is much older than slavery. Now, Dr. Asa Elliott, who's a chematologist, he's an expert in ancient Kemet. Kemet is the original country, okay, the original name of the country for Egypt. Okay, the word Egypt came into existence approximately 332 BC when Alexander of Macedonia came in and took over that region from the Persians. So this is important for us to know. So what happens is that the word Egypt is a foreign name. It's not the name that the people of Kemet called themselves. These are outsiders. And if you look at majority of the African countries, vast majority of the African countries, I think there's only two countries were not named by African. Yeah, two countries actually named by Africans. All the rest are named by foreigners or interlopers or later comers, whatever the case may be. So I think this is important for us to synthesize this information so we got a better understanding of the African continent. Okay, so if you look at Nigeria, for instance, we know it's a Portuguese word. Okay, Niger is a Portuguese word. Sierra Leone is a French. Okay, and we can go on, and we can see where people's colonized our countries, put their names on who we were within the particular regions they took at the Berlin Conference. Now, Asa Iliad says that when Eurocentrism started to rise from the 15 and 1600s right to the present day, there was 5 approaches that they decided to take in order to try to destroy the African image, the Black image. So the first one is where they destroyed things. So last week I talked about the destructions of temples, and I talked about the destructions of literature and libraries. When they couldn't destroy, they decided to distort. So what you'll notice if you go to ancient Kemet, or you look at some of the Kemetic images or statues, you will notice that most of the lips, but the majority of the noses have been broken. And that is to distort the image. Because at the time, if you look at when Napoleon went in around about the late 1700s with his scholars, and they come across this marvelous civilization or ancient civilization, and they start to see all these African heads on many of all these monuments. There was like a form of schizophrenia that took place with the Europeans. And Count Vonley basically says it perfect in a sense, which basically saying that, you know, with all the things that these people did in the past, talking about the Negroes, which means Black people, okay? And now they've become, you know, an element of our contempt in the modern day society.
I've lost the volume, Shadow. Can you come and help me, please?
Hello? So what's happened here? These are the stages in which Eurocentrists have gone through. They destroyed. If they couldn't destroy, they decided to distort in images. When they couldn't destroy and distort, they suppressed. They withheld images, or they withheld information. If they couldn't do that, they tried to falsify, they tried to change it in some way. And obviously the ultimate one was to intentionally confuse. And this comes as the concept which is known as conceptual incarceration. There's a concept in Afrocentrism, which is called scientific colonialism. And scientific colonialism has 3 basic principles where Eurocentrism is concerned. The first one is unsophisticated falsification. What that basically means is when they decided to lie. So the lie was either to distort, to destroy, to suppress, or to falsify. Okay, but mainly the first 3. The next one was integrated modification. They integrated a lie with the truth, myth with legend, okay, falsified information, etc., and amalgamated together. Integrated modification. It was to modify, it was to integrate all these things to modify it on European lines. This is what they did. And the last one was conceptual incarceration. Once you're able to achieve these 2 basic principles, then you can lock people into a certain way of thinking. And this is what they did. This is why, unfortunately, if you look at majority of the movies, which looks at the past of Black people, they only focus on slavery. Hollywood is responsible for these distortions, okay? European cinema, you know, even what's taking place in other countries. Okay, they like to start off Black people in slavery, unfortunately. They're obsessed with it. They're really obsessed with it. And this couldn't be further from the truth. Our history don't start in slavery. Our history was well before slavery, and it's still ongoing now. Slavery as abolished in many countries, because we know that slavery still takes place. So in conceptual incarceration is whereby the individual is locked into a certain mindset. Now, last week we looked at the children of Ham. Children of Ham, called from a biblical perspective, and this is the most ancient record that we have on genealogy and where people come from. So if you notice here, you will notice that Ham had 4 sons, Mizraim, Punt or Put, Kush, Canaan. Put is sometimes Libya. Other times in history, it's sometimes Somalia, Somaliland. And this one needs to be emphasized here. So there may be some Putian people that settled in Somalia. And we know this because there's an ancient name for that area that exists even to today when we look at ancient history. Misraim, obviously, was Egypt, okay, is what the Arabs call Misr. Okay, this is an African tribe, and this is the father of all these different individuals here. Then we have Canaan. So we have parts of Canaan, which is part of Jordan, okay, which is the northern part of Arabia. We got Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria. So we got Africans coming out of the continents, okay, and they are settling here. Then obviously we have the main group, which is the Kushites. Okay, the Kushites are probably the largest and they were the most sophisticated because they did a couple of things that other groups of people did not do. The first thing which they did, okay, they had managed observatories and they made all these calculations. So basically 7 days in a week, 24 hours in a day, etc., etc. How many days in a month? All these calculations would have been done. Okay, so they would have been able to tell time. The next stage for you to be a high culture is metallurgical skills, which means they move from Stone Age into metallurgy. And we know amongst the Kushites, they had gone into Stone Age and they went straight into the Iron Age. They seem to bypass the Bronze Age. This is important now. This is how sophisticated the Kushitic groups were. And then obviously we have to look at the intelligentsia in order to create a high culture. And who are the intelligentsia? They are your priests, they are your doctors, you're your scholars, they're your scientists. Once you have those 3 things that come together, you now have a high culture, which Europeans call civilization. But one thing I want to put your mind to here, Kush is really important here because you've got some of the Kushitic people who live in the eastern part of Africa. So up to where you see Upper Egypt, all of Sudan mainly, Eritrea, Djibouti, Somaliland, okay, Ethiopia, some parts of Kenya. You also got a Kushitic branch in the Arabian Peninsula now. And these will later be going to be called Arabs, okay, which comes from a word which is barren lands, okay. The land was a very sandy, deserty region. And then you have another group of Kushites in Iraq known as Mesopotamia. And these are your Sumerians. And I talked about this last week because there's this controversy now where these Sumeriologists, for instance, they talk wonderful things about about Mesopotamia or the Sumerians, but they don't know where the language comes from all of a sudden, and they don't know what the people look like, okay? This is distortion, okay? And this is suppression, like Asa Iliad has said, okay? So here I'm giving the most oldest records to show you who populated the world. The first people to populate the world were dark-skinned people. Here is another this is a linguistic evidence now. And I talked about this last week. So you've got the Kushitic people. Obviously, Kushitic is written in C, so Central Kushitic, Eastern Kushitic, Southern Kushitic. Out of here, between the Beja of the Sudan and the Central Kushitic groups, okay, you have the Semitic groups migrating into the Arabian Peninsula. They will now become Afro-Semitic. And we know that some of the Ethiopic languages are Semitic in origin. So we look at Arabic and Hebrew, Amharic, all these are Semitic languages. So its roots are in Africa. Okay, so this is important. So we're not just looking at the migratory or the diffusion where people spread into other lands. We're also looking at they came with language. This is linguistic evidence. This was documented by Martin Bonnell. I'm not sure if he's still alive. He wrote a 3-volume book called Black Athena. And what he started noticing was that Greco-Roman culture, okay, as far as high culture is concerned, it's a borrowing, okay, or the plagiarism of ancient African civilization, especially 2 types, which is the ancient Kemites or the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Kushitic tradition. Even when Alexander went into Egypt in 332, one of the first things he said, we are now in the land where the Greek gods originated. Alexander himself said this. And this is one of the reasons why Alexander the Great wanted to build the Library of Alexandria in Kemet, because there was nothing in Europe. All the literature was in Kemet. All the information was in Kemet. The largest amount of scripts at that particular time was in Kemet, okay, on what they call papyrus. There was many things written on walls, etc. So this is what we have to synthesize into our minds. The Semitic people come out and they go from Africa and they go into the Arabian Peninsula, populate the rest of the world. Then we got the three groups who are joined together now. Okay, three groups joined together. Your Kemites, which they call the Egyptians. You got your Berbers. These are your black Berbers. Many people, if you look at North Africa, tourism, etc., they never show you these people. They show you the later interlopers or the newcomers or the later invaders. That's the images you see when they promote North Africa. They never show you the indigenous people. The indigenous means your original. All indigenous people are native, but not all natives are indigenous. This is clear. This needs to be made clear. And so you got the Berber type that moves to North Africa, and you got the Chaldaic type that moves to Central and West Africa. And what's amazing about this is that when DNA analysis has come out of many of the mummies, okay, what they've noticed is many of them, like Ramses II, for instance, they say that his genetic thing is sub-Saharan. So you can see that they're linked. The West African is linked to the ancient Kemites. And we also had DNA analysis that came out 3 years ago in Egypt, where they said that 17% of the Egyptian population, this was a longitudinal study that took place for 11 years. As it stipulated, only 17% of the Egyptian population, okay, are Arab. The vast majority, 68 to 69% of them are Berber. This is the findings from DNA. This is what came out 3 years ago, okay, 3 years ago in the study. So it is clear if they have the Berber DNA, you can see that they're linked. They genetically they're linked, as well as historically are linked, because they shared similar countries whereby there was no borders. And this is just to emphasize again, the out of Africa, this is genetic evidence, go in here, Southern Arabia, going into the Persian Gulf, you're going into Sumeria. And there was another route that took place as well, where people went into the Levant, went into Europe and Southeast Asia and South Asia, etc. And this is just another diffusion of the Semitic groups again. This is the physical, okay? So you can see here, the Ethiopic, okay, or rather the Kushitic, we should call them. And we shouldn't call them Egyptian because the word Egypt wasn't around at that time, okay? They would have been called Kemet, Kemetu, Kemu. They have all these different names for who they were, which means the black people, the dark people, or the black lands. Them referring to themselves, not soil. Because if you read hieroglyphics or Medunetia, you will notice at the top, there's black coral, and at the bottom, you've got an individual, a person sat down. So they're talking about a black person. That's in the Medunetia or the hieroglyphics. Not the black land of soil like these Eurocentric so-called scholars who claim to be experts on ancient Kemet and Egypt to say it. Because every group of people name their country after themselves. But because Egyptian civilization is high and is associated with Africa, they want to try to say something else. So Sumerians call their country after themselves. The Akkadians call their country after themselves. But for some reason, the Egyptians call their country after their soil. This is falsification. This is suppression of information. This is distortion as well as destruction. This is barefaced lies, okay? To intentionally confuse, as Eliot said. So here you can see where some of them, where most of the Kushitic people, okay, actually settle here. Okay, they mainly settled in the southwestern part of Arabia. And these people will later be called Arabs. Arabs would be a group of people that come from the Arabian Peninsula, which is connected here with the African continent and was connected here thousands of years ago with the African continent before, there was a land bridge, before obviously there was a departing of many, many parts of the earth. Right, let's have a look now. So here, Let's have a look. This was taken from Dr. Bertram Thomas, who was not really a friend of dark-skinned people, but this is what he says. This was done, excavation, which was done in the Arabian Peninsula in the 1920s. He said, thousands of inscriptions have been collected in the Southwest Arabia. They are in the character which resembles Ethiopic, which means Kushitic, and is not related to the Arabic character, meaning the modern character with the Arabs use today, which indeed it antedates by 1,000 years. So we know the most sophisticated country at the time would have been the Kushitic groups of people of Mesopotamia. They are very sophisticated in the Arabian Peninsula. He also goes on to say that the original inhabitants of Arabia were not the familiar Arabs of our own time, but are very much darker people. And this is because of the archaeological digs and evidence. When they looked at the osteological measurements, they looked at craniological measurements. What they found that the dark-skinned Arabs, or the original Arabs, their skulls were dolichocephalic. They're the oldest and the original skulls that resemble African people. Okay, the Arabs which we see today, their skull measurements are what is known as brachycephalic. Which means they're a hybrid. They're a mixture of Indo-Europeans and Africans. That's who the ones who are today. Even though their skins are much lighter, etc., they're a mixture. They have roundish heads, not elongated heads like boats, like the ancient Egyptians are. So even from craniological evidence substantiates this. Okay, so that was Bertram Thomas again. And this was a book which was written in 1937, which you refer to as the Arabs. Now, one of the things, if you pick up this book today, these bits of quotation I've given you are no longer in there. This is funny, they're no longer in there. Because every time they dig, and you know this, the further they dig, the older the culture is, the more darker the people get. So there's this distortion taking place within the Western academies as far as research is concerned. So I think this is important for us to acknowledge what's really happening out there in the academies. This is just a clearer picture of the Kushitic branches, because we're going to be looking at Southern Arabia. We're going to look at the civilizations that came out of that area, which is connected strongly with the Kushitic people. But they would, so this is something for us to try to, or to focus on. I will need to do this one, okay? So it says here, in several instances in the Bible, however, Kush seems to refer to a location not in Africa. So sometimes when you read the Bible, Kush is not in Africa in most places. It's in the Arabian Peninsula, by here, and also in Mesopotamia, or what is known as modern-day Iraq, okay, which would have been Sumer. Here, if you look, on the purple part is all the sons of Ham and where they had settled in. So in Persia, the Elamites, the Sinites, Nimrod, who was the first king, he is a great-grandson of Noah, okay, the first king of the planet, okay, this in Mesopotamia. But what you show here, you see that the fusion is the other way. So you see the Africoid groups going to populate in Africa. And this is how it's said within the biblical text. So it still shows the same thing, but it shows the direction of diffusion taking place from Babel or from Mesopotamia into other regions. But the most convincing is the genetic evidence, DNA evidence, the linguistic evidence, which shows an out of Africa, okay, diffusion, okay, not an inside Africa diffusion. Okay, so here it is again, just to emphasize Babel, Nimrod, son of Cush, son of Ham, who was actually, the son of Noah. Right, we'll have a break now and see if we can answer questions. And then what I'll do, I'll go on to the next slides. So does anybody want to say anything before I move on? And let me just read the chat. This will give me a bit of time to read the chat. Let's have a look if anything's in that. Abu-Bakr. Which are the two African countries named by Europeans? Okay, I think I said that. You may have come later, but Nigeria is Portuguese. Niger is Portuguese. Sierra Leone is French, okay? Egypt is Greek. Ethiopia, okay, is Greek. And, you know, the list just goes on. Sudan is Arabic, yeah? Morocco is Spanish. So this is how it comes. So this is what we have to look at. Liberia was basically named after the country being liberal. Okay, this was during the American Colonization Society, which was established approximately, I think it's about 1812, if my memory serves, about 1812. And what the aim was because slavery was still going on in the Americas, and there was a lot of free Black people in America. They didn't want their freedom to give ideas to the people they were enslaving. So the American Colonization Society decided to use these free people to go back into Africa, okay, as a way of trying to remove them from the enslaved people in the Americas. And that's how Liberia was established. Liberia was established by the American Colonization Society, okay? And Britain took the same initiative for Sierra Leone. If you look at the people of Sierra Leone, they have a close link genetically and historically with the people of the Caribbean. As opposed to the people of Liberia, there's closer links with them with North America, the African American population. So Liberia and Sierra Leone were the product of this is why you have Freetown in Sierra Leone. It's all about freedom, the abolition of slavery, the abolition of the slave trade, etc. Okay. This is so interesting, Abu-Bakr. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. I was wondering which two countries, no problem. I have another one here. I have an obvious question, but I don't quite understand the concept of the sons of Ham in Africa. Okay, well, I will go over that again, but what happens is, if you look at it from a biblical perspective, what you'll find is that Noah's supposed to have had three sons, Ham, Shem, Japheth. And these are supposed to be the progenitors of the three main races on the planet. So Ham is supposed to be the father of the Black race. Okay, this is what is said. Okay, Shem is supposed to be the father of the Semitic groups of people, and Japheth is supposed to be the father of the Indo-Europeans. Okay, and this is how people trace their lineage back. So all I'm trying to do is go back to the original data in order to explain how racial groups, because at that time they would have all been dark skinned. They would have turned lighter skin much later on. This is what happens. But the emphasis here that we all come from one family, and it's the human family. It's through climatic changes, and obviously through other forms of social constructions, that we are now in the place we are. This person is named as being Black or white, or basically Semitic or Indo-European, European, Chinese, Japanese. These are things that have been socially constructed over the years, where we come from a much larger or wider group of people. I hope I've said that clear. Any other person want me to answer anything before we move on? Okay, what we'll do in this section, let's just have 5 minutes, because I know it's a short session. I wanted to give time for question and answers. This is just a 5-minute break. Get yourself some drinks, go powder your nose, come back, and we can start the second session. So we'll just have a quick 5 minutes. Last week, I focused on the matrilineal or matriarchal system. This is what African culture was based on. In all African countries, the only group of people mainly were patriarchal were the Zulus. The Zulus were very patriarchal in a sense, or patrilineal. The lineage came from the father, inheritance came by way of the father. Within all other societies outside the Zulu nation, because the Zulus said themselves that they originally came from North Africa before settling in Southern Africa or South Africa. So here we're going to look at the societal structure of Saber. Okay, so here marriage were matrilocal. What this basically meant that when a man married a woman, he would move either into her home or into her locality. Matri meaning the female, locality, local. Okay, so it's to do with an area. So marriages were matrilocal. That's what that means. Inheritance was matrilineal. Okay, so inheritance mainly came by way of the mother, not so much by the father, by the mother. When in African cultures, predominantly in many African cultures, which was patrilineal, yeah, the husband's wealth became her wealth automatically. Okay, so when the husband died, she was able to distribute most of that wealth or inheritance to whoever she wanted, usually the family. And also what was very common, especially in the Arabian Peninsula at this time, was polyandry, where a woman or a female can take multiple husbands. And this is what comes under the matrilineal system. When you see polyandry, sign because it's a form of polygamy, not polygyny. Polygyny is when a man takes multiple wives. Okay, polyandry is when a woman takes multiple husbands, but polygamy means if a woman can have multiple husbands or a man can have multiple wives. So we have to be careful with this terminology. So polygamy means for both. Polygyny specifically for the man, polyandry specifically for the female. So we're going to look at the Queen of Sheba. For some reason, the images are not coming up, and I don't know why. So I'm a bit not happy about that, but these things happen sometimes with technology. So the Sabian Empire became an extension of Ethiopia. And I've just shown you the diffusion that comes out of between the Beja and the Central Kushitic groups of people. And I talked about the Afro-Semitic groups going into the Arabian Peninsula. So I've showed you the map earlier. So this is just a quotation. The Sabian Empire became an extension of Ethiopia. So there was a relationship between Southern Arabia and East Africa. Okay, we shouldn't call it Ethiopia because Ethiopia means burnt face. It's not a negative or pejorative. This is how the Greeks saw darker skinned people. Ethiopia was equivalent to calling someone black or calling someone an African. Even if you read the inscriptions or you know of the Greeks or the scripts of the Greeks, etc., sometimes when they talk about Ethiopians, they're talking about the ancient Kemites or the ancient Egyptians. So it's just another way of saying black. So he says the Sabian Empire became an extension of Ethiopia and was ruled by a line of queens or Kentakes. That's what they were called, Kentakes. Or the Greeks called Candaces or Candaces by the Greeks. Now, what you're going to find with a lot of the history of ancient Kemet is that the names have changed. The names have changed of places, etc. So sometimes you have to go back to the primary names to give context. So this is what they were called. They were called Kentakes. And this influenced the matrilineal system. Before Islam arrived in the 7th century AD, Arabia was matriarchal. Okay, this is to show you that Arabia was matriarchal. Most people from that country don't know this because they're not unaware of their historical past because they were nomadic for centuries. And, you know, literacy was not an important way of life at that particular time. So this is important for us to acknowledge. So Arabia was matriarchal for over 1,000 years of recorded history. And this is how Sheba comes into the mix now. So she comes out with the Kentakes, all a line of queen rulers, okay? And she was able to rule a huge or a massive empire. Okay, so Bilqis or Makeda or the Queen of Sheba, she was born around 960 BCE. She was a great administrator, which actually shows that she was educated. She was supposed to be born in Aksum. She was supposed to be born in Aksum in Ethiopia. And that time, like I said, Ethiopia and Arabia was an extension of East Africa, you know, just across the Red Sea. And when her father died, etc., he literally left the empire to her. She actually ended up going to Saba, where another Kushitic tribe was, who spoke a Semitic language, and she became the ruler of that massive or huge empire. She was also known for being a great builder, you know, especially with monuments and temples, etc., okay, and observatories. And she was an international stateswoman. Much later to the Egyptian queens and sometimes the Nubian queens, but nevertheless, you got this interconnection. This is what's important. You got this interconnection with women leaders, okay, and with female leaders. This has only become recent in the Western world. Okay, the first queen of Sabians to be acknowledged historically was identified as Bilqis in the Quran, okay, as Makeda in Ethiopia's Kabri Nagast, and the Queen of Sheba in the Holy Bible. So it's the same individual we're talking about here. And this is what's important. A female ruler in antiquity who controlled massive amounts of land. She ruled from approximately from Upper Egypt right down into Kenya. You're talking about all of Sudan, Eritrea, Djibouti, Haksum, all those places, Ethiopia, most of the Arabian Peninsula, right up into Bahrain and Qatar, right up into the tips of Mesopotamia, the Persian Gulf. That was an empire. The whole of Arabia, right to the doors of the Levant, which is like Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, because that was Suleiman alayhi salam's or Solomon's, peace be unto him. That was his realm. Okay, this one was a powerful woman, and she had a huge empire. And a lot of belief is that it didn't even get invaded. And you'll find this with a lot of these female rulers in antiquity, that they were able to preserve the rule and the security of the country. Under men rulers, they would always send in armies out, etc. So female rulers and male rulers were very different. The Sabian civilization flourished under Queen Makeda's reign, setting a standard in which or by which other West Asian empires were measured. And that's how she was sophisticated. And like I said about the Kushitic people, they had advanced in metallurgical skills, building brick buildings, you know, developing a script, etc. This is what made them advanced. You need a script as well in order to be a great civilization to a large extent, or what is known as high culture. Okay, Makeda ruled her country with justice, fortitude, and wisdom for 50 years. Tradition has it that the land area she governed was quite extensive. The various lands ascribed to her empire indicated parts of Upper Egypt, it is Upper Egypt, Ethiopia, parts of Arabia, Syria, Armenia, India. This was this woman's empire, literally, which went even into almost into Central Asia. But it also went into Europe. So this is how huge this empire was. Makeda visits Solomon. Solomon prepared an apartment built of crystal from the floor to the ceiling for her. Under the transparent flooring ran a stream of water, which she would have to cross to come to him. He had heard that one of her legs resembled that of a donkey and was as hairy. And this was to ruse to discover if it was true. Now, what Joel Rogers is basically saying here, that there's a story where everybody heard about she had a so-called deformed foot, which looked like a donkey. And through Solomon's wisdom, he wanted to see if this was true, according to Joel Rogers. So what he did, because Solomon was one of the wealthiest and richest kings of his time. And he was having a lot of glass, okay, which was transported to him to building castles and crystal. So what happened in the palace when Bilqis or Makeda or the Queen of Sheba came to visit him? In order to see her, he didn't really want to tell her to lift her dress up, according to this story. So what happened was he made sure that there was a lake flowing underneath, which became transparent with the glass. So what happened is Bilqis, when she was walking across, she's lifted up her skirts to stop it from getting, or a dress to stop it from getting wet. And that's when Solomon, peace be unto him, was able to see what these fables have been saying for some time. And that's how he was able to see it. That was his wisdom without even asking her. This is what is meant to believe. But what I want to point your minds to here was that Solomon himself was a wealthy and rich king, okay? And he was an equal. And the thing was, they were intellectual equals as well. And this is important for us to acknowledge that within the Afro-Semitic groups of people and amongst the Kushitic groups or the East African groups, educating females was not considered a problem. It was not considered a problem. That only became a problem in European territories, unfortunately. But the thing I want to emphasize here is looking that women were on equal par to a large extent, okay, to men. There was, there would have been problems and issues from time to time, but with it being a matrilineal system and a mother having wielding control over their sons, they would have more than likely put things in place. Okay, so here I've talked about, she lifted up her dress to avoid getting it wet. Okay, Solomon was taken more by her beauty than her leg, by which he forgot to look. So apparently he didn't even get to look because he was bedazzled or dazzled by her beauty itself. Okay, so here is just a verse in the Bible where Bilqis or Makeda, when she goes to visit Solomon, she describes herself. I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedah, as the curtains of Solomon. Look upon me, because I am black, because the sun has scorched me. So she would have been dark skinned. She would have come out of that realm. Okay, she would have living in the desert as well. She would have need that melanin to live in a hot sun, etc., and to travel. So this is just an important factor of putting it back in place, because like Asa Iliad says, that Black history has gone for distortion, suppression, falsification, to intentionally confuse, okay, and even to destroy. And this is the same thing which is happening here. So what I'm trying to show you here, you're dealing with the Black queen or the dark-skinned queen who had a huge, massive empire, okay, who was knowledgeable, who was full of wisdom, and was as wealthy as Solomon himself. But Solomon was believed to be even much wealthier. Solomon and Makeda, or Makeda, out of the midst of 3,000 years emerged this beautiful love story of a Black queen who, attracted by her fame of Judean monarch. Okay, and this is important because what will happen is that Solomon and Sheba are believed to have had a son, Menelik, I think his name was, if his memory serves me right. And he was then sent to Ethiopia, where she was born in Aksum. And he began the Solomonic dynasty, which existed for 3,000 years up until the death of Haile Selassie in approximately 1975. So we have the oldest civilization, which is known to man, is ancient Kemet. It lasts for 3,000 years, from about 3100 BC right up to just after 30 BC. So that's approximately like 3,000 years. And the largest monarchy in the world comes out of Queen of Sheba. It comes out of Solomon. They had the son Menelik, which went into Ethiopia, what we now call Ethiopia, or Aksum, to be more precise. And then what happened was a line of successive kings started to emerge out of that progeny, out of that lineage. So this is where Haile Selassie, who died in 1975, is believed to be the direct descendant of Queen of Sheba and Solomon. Okay, so here it just talks about her wealth. Her wealth was immense, 787 asses, mules, and camels. This is what was used to transport herself to Solomon. Okay, she went to see Solomon himself. And these are the precious gifts and stones that she brought to Solomon's empire: gold, silver, precious stones, amber, rare wood, perfumes, and myrrh. So you can see the thing of the what I'm trying to emphasize here. You see the importance of trade now. So it's not just an empire, you see trade. So you got gold coming out of Nubia, because the word Nubia comes from a word which is Nub, which means gold. But in the ancient Kemet, Nubia means slave. So in the Kemetic language, Nubia means slave, but amongst the Kushitic people, Nubia comes from the word Nub, which means like a nugget of gold. This is what it actually means, okay? So you got silver, you got other precious stones, amber, wood, perfumes. So what I'm trying to show you here, not only does this woman has an extensive empire, an empire touching particular lands, far-reaching lands, etc. And what you find is that it interlinks trade groups, different trading people, and it extends her empire, which means it extends her influence. And a lot of that wealth is coming into her realm, where she is ruling in Southern Arabia. Right, we look at Queen T. So we looked at Queen T last week, and she was born in 1415. Now I'm going to stop here because some reason it's not showing the images. And you need to see the images. It's not showing the images for some reason. No, it's not showing. Let's have a look. Right, yeah, sort it out. So thanks for your patience. So these are just the images I just wanted to show you. And these are just some of the things which I explained earlier. So I'm going to put this into the equation so you've got some idea of what I was trying to show you along with the notes on the side. Right, so we're gonna look at Queen T. Let me just check the chat box. Is anyone, okay, let me just read this. How long were Queen of Sheba and Solomon in a relationship for? Well, according to this book here, for the short space of time. I'm not sure if you can see this, you should be able to. Okay, it's basically called the Book of the Glory of the Kings. It was a short space of time, maybe a couple years. She stayed in Palestine or Philistine. Then obviously she got pregnant. She's supposed to send her son back to Ethiopia to be looked after by a paternal side of the family. And then she had to return back to Yemen in order to rule because she had a massive empire to rule. So they were still married, but they lived a distance. He was a king. She was just as powerful as him. And they they were married for a long time, but the problem was that they lived distance because of the relationship. This is what happens when a woman has to work, you know and we can see that that those problems existed in antiquity too. There may be a sacrifice in the marriage. There might even be a sacrifice where the upbringing of the child is concerned, and this was clear with Menelik. So I hope I've answered your question. Okay, what was the book called? The Book of the Glory of the Kings is a translation by Wallace Budge. Okay, it's one of the oldest books which was written in Ethiopia, which was later translated. So this book was written probably just after the death of the Queen of Sheba herself. It's a book, you can buy it on Amazon. This book actually came, I've been after this book for about 4 or 5 years myself because of my research, and it actually came last week. This is why it looks so nice and clean. But all the information which I got is from this book, but I've had to use other sources, second source, in order to bring this presentation together. Any more questions before I move on? No? Okay. Right, so we look at Queen T. We looked at Queen T last week. She was Nubian, but we're going to be looking at her again. Okay, so she was born in 1450 BC, and she was Nubian. Her father is believed to be Joseph of the children of Israel. And this is according to Ahmed Osman, who's an Egyptian. He's an Egyptian Egyptologist. Okay, he's born in Egypt. He's an Egyptian by nationality or by birth, but he's also an Egyptologist. And he basically says that Joseph, one of the 12 tribes, is supposed to be her father. And there could be some truth to that to some extent, because what happens under her dynasty is known as the Amanid dynasty. Okay, this is when Akhenaten, whose original name was Amenhotep Amenhotep IV, he changed his name to Akhenaten and changed the god of Aten from the god of Hamun, because Hamun was a multiplicity of gods. Okay, and he believed to have brought monotheism. So there is probably some link between Joseph or Yusuf alayhi salam and the Amana dynasty with monotheism. So this is something I think is important for us to understand. So we're linking the children of Israel now, okay, who were in sojourn in Egypt with this particular dynasty. So it's around about this time. So she married Amenhotep the third. She was about 13 to 14 years, and he was about 52. Now, why I mention this is because back in antiquity, marrying young girls, which were seen as women, they became women on the menstrual cycle. Not what's taking place over here. Even in this country, yeah, it was only after the Age of Marriage Act, which was passed in 1929, where young women were now seen as girls. And you had to marry them at between 18 and 21, which they need parental consent. But before 1929, in the UK, in Britain, by having parental consent, okay, a young girl or woman, as she was called, could marry at the age of 12, but the boy had to be 14 because girls in Britain were much more mature. And that's how, and it was changed in 1929, which was known as the Age of Marriage Act. So marrying young was part and parcel of tradition. Okay, girls became women through menstrual cycle, through that transitioning, not through age now, which is 18 or 21 or whatever the case may be. And marrying older men was not a problem if they had parental consent. And this is what's important, okay? She was a commoner and a priestess. So she comes from a priestly family. So there may be some indication that she is related to Joseph or Yusuf, peace be unto him, in some way. Because what's happened now, only recently in the West, is where Western women have been fighting to become priests. This was known back in ancient Kemetic time. Women could become priests. So this is how far behind the Western world is from the ancient world as far as women liberation and progression is concerned. Mother of Akhenaten and King Tut, King Tutankhamun. She used to believe the mother. Some people say she's probably the stepmother of King Tut. But what I want to emphasize here is that King Tut himself says, because a lot of archaeologists and Egyptologists are saying that Akhenaten was the father of King Tut, but King Tut himself says that he was the son of Amenhotep III, her husband. So who am I supposed to believe? King Tut or modern Egyptologists? Modern Egyptologists are saying that Akhenaten is his father. Okay, King Tut himself says his father was Amenhotep III. He doesn't mention his mother. He mentions his father, Amenhotep III, which means that if Amenhotep III is his father, then he must be a brother to Akhenaten. This is clear. That's why we have to pay attention. We have to read these documentations and go back to primary sources, because Egyptology, unfortunately, has done so much falsification over the years that they're reinventing the wheel, and they still want to call it, you know, other than what it really is, which is a wheel. Okay, she was the mother-in-law of Queen Nefertiti. Okay, she's a mother-in-law of Queen Nefertiti, and I will tell you the story. She's also the grandmother of Scotha, in which Scotland gets its name. And this is important. So when the Amarna dynasty comes, because what happens is she's a ruler behind the throne. This woman is a ruler behind the throne. She is a ruler behind the throne of her husband, Amenhotep III. When he dies, Akhenaten comes into power, but he doesn't want to rule. He marries Nefertiti. And what happens was he migrates him and his people to another land, etc. She was a woman behind the throne. She kept Kemet together, the empire of Kemet together. Then he died under suspicious circumstances. Then the next son, Samankare, comes. He doesn't really want to rule either. So she is still ruling behind the throne. And then he dies under suspicious circumstances. And then King Tut comes in as a boy king. But he only comes in as a boy king once Queen T dies. All this is wiped out of history by Egyptologists. For some reason, they will not recognize this woman. I'm not sure it's because whether she was a woman or whether she was black or she was a black female in prominence and an influential position. But the story which I've just told you is not recorded by many modern day Egyptologists. They will not give a recognition. But Scotha, yeah, is supposed to be one of the daughters of Akhenaten. And when the Amarna dynasty had to pack up and leave, basically, because the Hamun priesthood became very, very powerful, and they were totally against this monotheistic principle of the one God. The family of King Tut and Akhenaten and all those people had to migrate, and it's believed they migrated to Scotland. Her nickname was Scotha, and this is where the country Scotland comes from. And you'll find a bit of this information in a book which was written in 1884. It's called Ancient and Modern Britons by David McRitchie. Ancient and Modern Britons. This is when Britain was black, not white. This is way before the Celtic people, the Welsh and the Scottish and the Irish Celtic people comes in. There was another group of people that lived in Britain long before that. And he talks about the story of Scotha and her descendants settling in Scotland, you know, creating a kingdom which ruled, and it lasted for centuries until they amalgamated with the Celtic people and, you know, lost their phenotype, whatever the case may be. But this is important because what you will find is that if you look at some of the other historians, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, they actually show affinities between the Druid religion and the ancient Kemetic religions. And that's something which I'll talk about at a later date. I won't talk about it now. So this actually shows those similarities. There has to be connection or diffusion. There must be either some contact or people moving to Britain with those basic principles, which influenced Druidism or the Druids, which was the ancient Celtic religion. There's another image of Queen T. As you can see, obviously there's Queen T. You can see, you know, she's African, Africoid, she's Nubian. And this is another image of her here. Obviously, you can see Afro hair there, you know, even back then she was struggling with it. But the emphasis I'm trying to show you here that this woman was powerful. She ruled, okay? But she was also a commoner which ranked high within ancient Kemetic society. This is the mummy of her father and her mother, okay? Now, the father's name is supposed to be Yuhya. And Osman believes that Yuhya is equivalent to Yusuf or Joseph. This is what he believes. He believes that this is, I don't believe this is Joseph himself, Joseph, one of the 12 tribes, or Joseph, the coat of many colors, or Joseph, I don't believe that, I don't believe that that's himself, but there could be a relationship. That might be his son. That might be his son. But you can see the thick lips. Okay, you can see the Semitic nose here. You can see a Semitic / Africoid nose, and that's her mother and father. They were priestly people, and they brought her up having a strong religious ethic. So they must have worked for the 18th dynasty pharaohs. They must have worked for the 18th dynasty pharaohs. For Amenhotep III to want to marry, they're giving their daughter in marriage to him, and she ended up ruling a huge and massive empire. There's Queen T there with her husband, Amenhotep III. And as you can see, they're co-equals in life as well as death. If you notice there, they're the same size. When he commissioned for this statue to be made at the time, the Harmene priesthood and most of his advisors were totally against it. How can you have a woman as high as you? And that's how much he loved and respected this woman. Okay, even though she was a commoner, they first was against the marriage because she was a commoner. And then for him to elevate her to the station, the position that he did, it did cause element of problems within the empire. But we know the problems that I'm not sure if it's his auntie, I think it's his auntie or his grand auntie or something like that, was Hatshepsut. Okay, this is important here. So you see that Hatshepsut had to go through her own problems as a female pharaoh. We shouldn't call her Queen Hatshepsut. She's Pharaoh Hatshepsut. That's how she's written in the inscriptions. Obviously, there was a lot of defacing of many of the scripts that was written on these walls. They were trying to rub Hatshepsut out. So there was controversy. I'm not trying to give you this image that, although in African societies or within the African continent, matrilineal system and the matriarchal system was wonderful, everything was fine. No, women had to put up some sort of resistance, but the core of the principles was there in the culture. So men were not surprised when women took on leadership roles, okay? What the problem is when she was more powerful than him, or whether she was not prepared to share the throne with him. That's when the problems came. And this is them here again. This man loved this woman so much. And if you can look at there, you can see how her headgear is slightly high. So he's trying to tell people she is the power behind the throne. And you can see her love and affection towards him with her arms being around his waist. She's telling, because she was more the chief wife, he did have lesser wives. Okay, he did have lesser wives, but that's her telling, that's her stamping her statement of who she is and what she is. Okay, Pharaoh Amenhotep III expressed love for this Black queen. The gift he lavished on her made her wealthy in her own right. An ornamental lake, a mile long and a fifth of a mile wide, designated for pleasure excursions on the royal barge, was dug and named Lake of Tea. So this man, because of his love, and this is true romance now. Not the type of romance you see. This is a man that decides to build a lake a mile long, a fifth wide for this woman, naming a city after her. Okay, this is what these African men were like towards their females at that time, trying to elevate them and trying to make them their equal. This is what makes her so special. She was envied by many, many people at the time, but the fact of the matter is, she was a power behind the throne. By the time she reached that age, this man was a very old man, very old. He was supposed to marry Nefertiti, and Nefertiti came in, but because Nefertiti came from Persia, a lot of people don't know that she came from Persia. Her father was Dusrata. Dusrata was writing letters directly to Queen T. It was bypassing Amenhotep, Queen T. So Queen T was the power behind the throne. And that is what a lot of iconographists are saying what this means. Her arms being around her husband means she is the power behind, she's holding him. She's the power behind the throne. Okay? He erected palaces in her name. This is how much this man loved her. Had the Nile water directed to her port. So there was a lake. He actually dug something, which was next to the Nile in order for some of that water to go near to her palace. This is what this man done in the name of love for this woman. And this woman really appreciated this as well. The first time a queen consort was honored in this way. No queen was honored in this way. No one ever dug a lake or built a palace in antiquity for any woman. He's supposed to be the first person to have done that. Okay? Co-equals in life and death. Amenhotep decreed her burial beside him with his own royal tomb. So this is what he commissioned for them to be. They're going to be equals in life as well as in death. I won't read through all this, etc. But all I just want to do is just summarize some of those principles there. They wanted to create her knee high, but he refused to have a knee high. He wanted her to be next to him because he was getting old, was one thing, but he loved this woman so much, and she was a capable leader as well as being a capable ruler. And this is a poem he writes to her. So not only building lakes and building palaces and having part of the Nile go down to where her palace is, for their own personal enjoyment, he even writes poems to her. And this was considered a bit soppy and sloppy to an extent by the aristocratic group amongst the ancient Kemites. Why is this man who's supposed to be so powerful writing love poems and love songs to his wife? This is quite demeaning in a way. But this is how much love this African pharaoh had for his queen. So let's have a look, at some of her attributes. She was a capable ruler. She was well educated. Okay. One of the things is she was educated by her father and her mother, who were priest and priestess. That's who her mother and father was. So in her library contained religious history, religious texts. She wrote things on history, looking at the history of ancient Kemet and ancient Nubia, because she was Nubian. She also memorized a lot of things in scientific texts, poetry, and short stories as well. Okay, she mastered most of this content through memorization. And this is important, that women were just not reading for the sake of reading, it was reading to master, to have a level of agency in their life. She exerted political influence whereby her decisions were highly respected and executed. And I don't have the image here, I showed it last week, but if you want to go back to my video last week, I showed the size of this woman's empire. But this woman's empire stretched right up into the Mesopotamia. okay? Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, most of the Arabian Peninsula, Palestine was all under this woman's realm, okay? Most of North Africa, Libya. When we move down even further, the whole of Upper and Lower Egypt, they were still united. If you look at Nubia, which is Upper and Lower Nubia, which is in Sudan. If you go down to Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, okay, and Somalia, all this was her realm. All this was her realm. This is how powerful this queen was. Right, she's also the first recorded female Secretary of State, not Madeleine Albright. Yeah, this woman, which goes back to about 1400 BCE. So we're talking about the first Secretary of State was recorded approximately what? Almost 3,500 years ago. Let me just, I think someone's typed something. It may be towards me. Somalia, yes. Okay, someone is happy that I've mentioned my thanks to educate this Abu-Bakr. Okay, what was the book called? Oh, I've answered that question. Okay, so I've answered those. Jammed. Well, first, okay, Queen's son, consort, and she was also a queen mother. So she had dual roles within this empire, this woman. She had dual roles within this empire. So it's important for us to recognize the role that African women played in antiquity. They didn't just live on the sideline like how things was taking place in Europe and amongst Indo-European groups and most of the Semitic groups. African women had leadership qualities and they obtained leadership positions. And this is why this is important for us to know. And this is one of the reasons why I'm focused on females, because I'm not going to make the mistake as a historian that Europeans have made and most Afrocentrics make when they only want to focus on men. We cannot focus on men because that's only telling half the story. We got to look at women, and not just in antiquity. We also have to look at the role that women played, yeah, in the enslavement period. Because sometimes when us Black men who were slaves were broken, it was women, it was Black women who took on the rules of lifting up the sword or the rifle to fight the imperialists, whether the British or whether the French or the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Danes, the Swedes, the Germans, even the Italians who occupied the so-called Americas. It was Black women that took up those roles. So I have to give you a two-side story. It's important because some of the things which they introduced in at their rule at their time, men didn't do, and we need to recognize this reality. So let's have a look at beauty and fashion. Okay, African women on the East Coast had invented lipstick. Okay, so the first people to invent lipstick today were East African women. This is what's been recorded. They've recorded these things, okay? And eyeshadows to make themselves beautifully pleasing to their husband's eyes and soul. This is what it was about, to attract their husband's attention, not to attract other men's attention. So this is what it was all about, because these women are proud of who they were, what they were, and how they can be something special. This is why makeup was invented. This is where makeup was first recorded. The first people to record as institute makeup were Nubian women in Egypt, because there's a massive Nubian population in Egypt, but mainly in modern day Sudan. And we know that on the peripheral elements where the Red Sea is, places like Djibouti, Eritrea, and Somaliland, yeah, where you had little small villages, this would have taken stock, especially with henna and all these other type of things. This is where beautification first begins. So you look at the beauty and cosmetic industry, it was African women who pioneered it. They were the foundation of this. Okay, large elaborate wigs she wore were imitated by women in Kemet. So just like I mentioned this last week, just like how the European hair of women is worn by Black women as a weave, back then the Afro was the weave. Putting Afro hair on the hair, they imitated this woman. So there was a time where Black aesthetics or Black beauty or Black phenotype was considered the in thing and the most beautiful thing. It may not be considered that now. And I'm going to be doing a thing, I think it may be December time. I'm going to be doing a thing called Beauty and the Bleach, and I'm going to touch upon these things. Because when you look that darker skinned women really prized. The darker you were in this particular time was the more beautiful you were seen. Today in modern society, the darker you are, no matter which culture it is, black, white, yellow, red, or brown culture, the darker you are seen is the more ugly you are seen. So what has changed in 3,500 years? Something has changed in 3,500 years. Bilqis was beautiful, dark and beautiful. And she was seen that by Suleiman alayhi salam. So what we have to amalgamate in our minds is trying to look at the society as it was back then. Okay, earrings worn by Nubian girls before puberty became a fashion in Kemet. So the wearing of an earring was established by Nubian women, by women from either in Egypt who were Nubian or from the Kushitic branch of people. They're the first ones to wear earrings. Okay, this is important. So I know within the Muslim tradition, Islamic tradition, they talk about, I think it's Hagar, I think, what's they talking about, who is Nubian. She was from Egypt, she was Nubian. She's a mother of the Arabs. Okay, one of those, the Musta'ariba, the mixed Arabs, the ones which Prophet Muhammad comes out of, and the later groups of people, which came in and amalgamated with the dark-skinned Arabs in the Arabian Peninsula. Okay, so earrings or wearing of earrings comes out of Africa. So this is important. So when you look at the beauty industry, the cosmetic industry, African women at the foundation of many of those things that we are buying as far as cosmetics are concerned. Her clothes were imitated that expose her shapely hips. Now, the reason why I wrote that, because in some of the images you will notice with Queen T that she's wearing, tight clothes, tight fitting, whatever the case may be. But now we see the fashion within the Western world now. I'm talking about the booty and all this other type of thing where the Black female figure is worshipped and is borrowed and to some extent stolen. We know about the Kardashians, what they have done. That's all false. That's all false. And we know if you go back to the 17th and 18th century in Europe, in France, Sweden, Britain, Spain, have a look at the dresses that the women wore. It was imitating dark-skinned women, especially the women of South Africa, with the big hips, etc., with those dresses that came out like that. This is what he used to imitate. And if you know the story of Sarah Bartman, write this name down. Read the story of Sarah Bartman, and that will give you a clearer picture of the mindset of white women in Britain, not just during the 1800s, but also onto the 20th century. Even Queen Victoria herself was imitating Black female body types. She was. Have a look at her dresses. It was the in thing. But now you see where these women are put at the bottom of the social ladder, but her beauty tips and her phenotype is being taken by others and called other than what it is. So I think this is important when we're looking at beauty and how African women saw themselves and how they were seen by their men in the past. So I won't talk too much about that. This was on my video, which is on YouTube, but I was just emphasizing that this woman, Queen T, she ruled behind 4 men. Her husband, who was at the top, Amenhotep III, and her 3 sons, Akhenaten, Semenkare, and King Tutankhamun. This is important. And then obviously her descendants were the ones that settled in Scotland. And this is where we get the name Scotland from Scotha. That was her granddaughter's name, Scotha, who was a daughter of Akhenaten. We're going to look at Queen Candace. So who is this Queen Candace? The queens of Ethiopia or Nubia, who had the name Candace, were noted for their fight against foreign rulers. After the death of Cleopatra, Roman power, that should be a capital, by the way, so that's my mistake. Roman power tried to take the Nile Valley of the various queens who had the name Candace. 5 are known. So there were 5 Candaces known in history. 2 of them are written in the Bible. One's written in the Old Testament, but there's one written about more in the New Testament. So we're dealing with African women rulers who were queens, who were warriors. They took men out to fight the so-called enemies. And this is important here. So when it talks about the queens of Ethiopia, remember what I said what Ethiopia is? It's a Greek word, which means burnt face or dark face. It doesn't necessarily mean Ethiopia, the country today. It just means people from the Sudan, okay, Eritrea, Djibouti, Somaliland, Somalia, those areas, Ethiopia, and some parts of Kenya. That's what Ethiopia means. Ethiopia means burnt-faced people with dark faces. Nubia is definitely the Sudan, northern Sudan, primarily. So what I'm trying to emphasize here, we're going to look at the Kentakes, or the Candaces, is what the Greeks call them. So the Kentakes or the Candaces. In Kush, remember Kush is the upper part of Nubia, okay, which I showed you the map earlier, upper part of Nubia, all of Sudan, all of those borders on the Red Sea, okay? When we're looking at places like Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, etc., all that will come under Kush. This is the name of that land, Kush. Kush is also, Arabia, southern Arabia. And I showed you the map as proof. And Bilqis or Makeda or the Queen of Sheba comes out of this tradition. She's also Kushitic, because if you look at the Red Sea, their relationship with the Arabs, okay, or the ancient Arabs and the Kushitic people was one. They share similar language linguistically, okay? They share similar culture, and they married from amongst one another. So there is an antiquitous relationship between these two groups on either side of the Red Sea. The Royal Institute of the Kentakes, or Queen Mothers, because that's what Kentakes mean, Queen Mothers, was well established. The Kentakes exercise an authority and a degree of political power rarely enjoyed by a counterpart in Egypt. So what it shows that these Kentakes from Nubia were even more powerful than the likes of Hatshepsut, Queen T, Nefertiti, Cleopatra, and all these other groups of people, because they had much more of a reverence for the patrilineal or the patriarchal system. Okay, the Kentakes exercise an authority with degree of political power, rarely enjoyed by their counterparts. By the Meroitic period, okay, this is in northern Sudan, or which is upper Nubia period in the history of Kush, her authority and influence had become so pervasive, so hidden, but it was felt, that she was able to assume the rulership independently, giving rise to a line of rulers known in history as the Candaces, or Latinized words, which obviously associate with the Kentakes. So this is important. This is really important for us to know the way that Black female queens wielded power in antiquity, and how they were able to secure the borders, because you're going to see how these women secure the borders, especially when you look at what takes place with Alexander of Macedonia. He tried to get into, he couldn't even get into Nubia because of the Kentakes. These queens, these powerful queens, were warriors who took the war to the Greeks or to the Macedonians. And a similar thing when the Romans came in, they couldn't penetrate that. This is why you don't find much inscriptions of Greco-Roman inscriptions in Nubia. Okay, they stopped them, they kept them out. You see a lot of it in Egypt because they took over those centers, but you don't see it in Nubia. This is showing you that there is something about having powerful women in the country, and how they, wielding that type of power, can maintain security. Because you find sometimes security that these women maintained was far much higher than men. And this is why these women need to be mentioned. This is really important here. We need to look at the greatness of these women, not because they were women, because they were Black, and they are not seen of any substance in contemporary society. And it's unfortunate that we've had to go through this type of reality in order to now try to go back into our history, so we can put ourselves back to where we once belonged, so we can get our self-esteem and self-confidence, so we can now have our self-worth. Because the Black woman now is considered, argumentative and problematic, and she's always wants to fight and all these other type of things. There could be some truth in that, but a lot of that could be connected to her past. Her past. She didn't take nonsense from foreigners. She didn't take nonsense from people who wanted to come into her territory and take it over because they felt it was their right to take it over and to take her kids into slavery and bondage and captivity. Maybe that's why they have that bit of fire in them. So we need to equate ancient history with modern history, and then we'll have a clearer picture of why they are what they are. Because we are products of our own society. We are products of our own experiences. And that does not negate our past experiences. It doesn't. So let's be fair when we're judging these women and the qualities of these women. Sometimes these qualities are something which is inherited, not through blood or DNA, inherited through the process of socialization. When I talked about socialization last week, what did I focus on? There's two forms of ways you can socialize children, socialize our family, socialize our children. Through instruction, what we say, what we teach, and imitation. What we see, we imitate our parents' behavior. That's the two processes of socialization. So I'd like you to think about these realities when we are thinking about the greatness of Black women. So I finish on this one. We can have a little break because I need something to drink. So this is just an illustration of Queen Candace taking her elephants, okay? And you find that usually you find when you see elephants in the battlefields, because the elephant is equivalent to today's tank. That's where the idea comes from. If you look at the nozzle on the front of the tank, it's an elephant, okay? This is what Africans took into the warfare. And she took this out to Alexander. Queen Candace, Empress of Ethiopia, meaning Kush. We have to say Kush, not Ethiopia, okay? And general-in-chief of its armies, waiting for Alexander, okay, the Great, to cross the new borderland at the cataracts, okay? Alexander, having conquered Egypt easily, decided against the invasion of the ancient center of Black power and halted his armies at the first cataract. And this is what this woman did. This woman was taking no nonsense whatsoever. And she stopped the Greeks from penetrating Nubia. This is how powerful these women were. How many of you knew that a woman actually defeated Alexander the Great? How many of you knew this? Write this in your box. And why don't we know this? This is important. This is really important. But this is recorded history. Because we know the Greeks and Macedonia, Alexander of Macedonia. We know they were conquering. They conquered the Persians. They conquered Mesopotamia. And they just went on and they went on. And they conquered more land. They went into India and conquered India. But they couldn't penetrate any further from Upper Kemet. They couldn't go into Upper Nubia. This is this woman that stopped them. And this is what she used, her army. And she was the head of an army of men. This is important. Head of army, you know, this is, we're talking approximately 332 BC. 332 BC this took place. So what I'm going to do, we're going to have a break for 10 minutes, and then I will continue. Those who want to stay can stay. I'll answer some of these questions. These questions are directed to me. Right. Let's have a look now. Oh, there's quite a lot has been written, so I'm only just going to go for the ones which has got my name, because I said that's easy, because I know some of you are conversating on here. How long was Queen of Sheba with Solomon? I could have read that. What was the book called? So, yeah, okay. The Story of My Life, okay. There is so much African history that has been suppressed, not just about Black people, but particularly Black women, which is awfully true. And thanks for that, Patience. Much of the narratives of these heroines are similar across Africa. Thank you very much. And that's so true. This is just a little snippet of a continent. Africa is not a country, it's a continent. And there's so much richness with how women engage and how women themselves put themselves at the forefront for change. And suppressed at the bottom of the barrel makes one wonder how far we will go regards our humanity if Black women were allowed to live today, okay, in peace. Okay, that's a general thing. Now, this is the Black history we are talking about, okay, fair enough. And it needs to be there. We need to recognize Black women, we need to. They've been writing out of the history, just like how we were written out of history, collectively. Now we're coming back into history. Sometimes some of us men, unfortunately, are forgetting our queens, our princesses, our women, you know, and this can't be, you can't get one, we can't focus on one part of the story, because it was like Bob Marley said, half the story is never being told. We have to tell the other side to give context, to bring balance. And I talked about the concept of Tahuti and Ma'at last week, which brings balance, okay? You know, reciprocity, justice, equality, and all these other type of characteristics we need in order to develop. Right, let's have a look. Great session, Abu-Bakr. Thank you. I'll have to watch the rest of the recording. It is so late here. Thank you, Liz, if you're still here, because I know you didn't went away. Where the elephants revered throughout that part of Africa. Jacqueline, yes, they were. You'll find that elephants were used in battle in places like mainly in Nubia. We also know that elephants was used in North Africa under Hannibal Barca, during the Second Punic Wars. And there is other evidence of elephants being used in other little battles as well. I know elephants were used against Alexander when he penetrated India after taking over Afghanistan. So this is important for us to know how we use animals in particular battle in battle strategies. Okay. So yeah. So what we'll do, we'll have a break here. If anybody wants to ask me any questions, please ask me questions. Let's have a 10-minute break and we will resume. Any questions at all?
Thank you very much indeed. This is a fantastic session. So interesting. So I'll leave you though now. It's very late here in Australia. Okay. Bye.
Thank you very much, Liz. Thanks for turning up as well. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Good. Bye. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye now, Liz. Bye-bye. Right. Just before I start, I'm just going to answer some of the questions. Someone's asked me, what sources do you use to find this information? Where can I look to find out more about this? No problem at all, Lauren. So let's have a look.
You know, my point is only that within history, the truth has been whitewashed and numerous amounts of times. And the Renaissance was one of the times when it got whitewashed. And we are revealing or uncovering some of the whitewashing.
Yeah.
But it still takes an acceptance by the multitude of people. In this case, the curriculum we are actually working on is in Wales, actually, you know, where we can push through Black history, shared history, human history, what makes us together. But still, I'm saying the truth is still an offense to many.
Yeah.
And yes, so I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to say softly approach, but there has to be approaches like you refer to in the ways you teach, with the left and the right side, and the whole universal way you're teaching and want your work to be accepted, that actually, right, to enable the masses to say, yes, Abu-Bakr, right, man, and right, because it's right, but it's just the truth and the acceptance of truth, because the truth is an offense to many, right? Yeah, including the Welsh, you know, right? Yeah, even the Celtic story. I heard you talk about the Celtic story, but and well, you know, the same story was to be said of Ireland and the Twa people and the original Pygmies, you know. So I heard you make great reference, and it's true. It's one world. It did get separated. There was shipping and transportation and literatures. You know, there's great burning of books in Spain in the Spanish Inquisition, and they have a celebration now where they burn all books, you know, as well. That's a burning up of history and a distortion. So I agree with everything, but again, I'll just go back to the point. It's the acceptance of the masses, because we've had things on social media saying Black history, what about Italian history, what about this history, what about South Asian history, what about, you know, and in the end, your talk dictates, your presentation dictates, it's about us all. And I think this is what we more to show Wales, but not only Wales, the world, because actually Wales is one of the first places to have Black history within their curriculum in the world, you know. So respect and honor for the presentation. That's my little contribution.
Right, I'm just going to read through these. Thanks for that, Chris. I'm just going to read through some of these questions here. Okay, at Abu-Bakr, I'm reminded again this week how much of contemporary thinking, white global north thinking, is underpinned by this blinkered and sometimes fabricated view of history. Even just the idea of Europe or what it is to be European, as if that was somewhere or somehow separate from everywhere else in the world. Much of that, that's and that's what's happened. Is, you know, when people have conquered, they come and they divide. It's about divide and conquer. So when you divide and conquer, it's not just physically, it's done mentally, and it's done through different types of institutions: education institutions, economic institutions, labor institutions, political institutions, religious institutions. All of it manifests within those institutions. So this, we have to understand divide and conquer. Divide and conquer is usually seen as something that is done physically. No, it's done mentally as well as socially in all those different institutions I think about. And that is why history has been marginalized. You've got history and you've got other history, Black history, Oriental or Chinese history, yes, whatever the case may be. And that was done by design. That was socially constructed. So I hope I've answered your question. Let me go on to say European somehow, somewhat is thought about architectural history, for example, is based upon Greek and Roman architecture. as a credible of so-called civilization, and yet you've extended that to several thousand years today. And that's what I mean. So when you look at Greco-Roman culture, it bases foundation. Culture is diffusive. Okay, culture evolves and then it becomes diffusive. So culture starts somewhere, there's a centering, and it diffuses. So when you got the Greco-Roman culture has contact with the ancient culture of the world, like Sumeria. They have connection with ancient Kemet and ancient Nubia. So they're influenced by that. Culture influences a group of people, they take on and they become the custodians. But unfortunately, when you talk about the classics are the Greco-Roman period. You know, they talk about Greek philosophy. Chinese don't have philosophy, Chinese have thoughts, even though Chinese philosophy is older than Greek philosophy. That's considered classics. So what happens is, unfortunately, through takeover, the people relegate the best part of the past to themselves. So I think I've answered that. Thank you, Abu-Bakr. Okay, thank you. Thank you. That was very insightful. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed that. I do have more slides, but I don't want it to be overkill like it was last week. So I want to leave it on a nice note, leave you for something to think about. I'll stay on for another 2 minutes. If you want to write any more questions in the box for me to answer, I'll answer them. If you want to come and speak and just to give your views for clarification purposes, to elaborate on something that I said, please do so. But I'm going to stay on for another 2 minutes for that to take place or for that to happen. Thank you very much. Anybody? I've got another message, yeah? Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ruth. Mark, thank you too. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I both recognize you from last week, so thank you for attending. Any questions, anybody? No? Okay, that's wonderful. I'm tired. I'm going to go and have a rest now. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I shall see you next week, approximately the same time. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you very much.